You say you were
So that's
for life work.
disregard this guy.
He's a little twisted. Any other mistakes? That, just
I
I really screwed up.
We sold, I guess, we had the Allen Group. Richard Allen and I formed that company, and it started really at the beginning of '94, and it went through November of '97 when we sold our entire portfolio to Kilroy Realty, and then in an UPREIT transaction, and then we became part of Kilroy Realty. I became Chief Development Officer for Kilroy. And in retrospect, we were rocking and rolling in that time frame. It was a great transition for the San Diego economy from a defense and savings and loan-oriented economy to one where technology was really starting to take hold and really becoming a robust user of space. And we were doing really, really well, but we ended up monetizing. One of the partners in the company really wanted to monetize and needed to monetize, so we sold our company at that point. And I'd say, probably in retrospect, even though it worked out well in many ways, I wish we probably hadn't sold our company to Kilroy.
It worked out really well for him. I wouldn't feel too sorry. That was the biggest bunch of bullshit I've ever I was with him the next day. He was like freaking high-fiving me at that time. Anyway, no, I think that what Steve's talking about is you put your blood, sweat, and tears into something, and yes, you don't time it perfectly. Maybe you do, maybe you don't. But there's a lot of emotion that goes into building these companies, and I think that's probably as much what you're talking about. And then you sell to a public company, and it's a whole different deal when you're in a public company versus a private company. So I know exactly what he means, and I can see that. Steve, we've got a lot of younger professionals out in the audience here. Many of them were not around in 1993, or born for that matter. So if I was one of these young people that are maybe a broker, maybe a title person, a lender, whomever, property manager, whatever it may be, and they look at Steve and go, God, one day I want to be you. What advice? What career path? What would you suggest they need to? Give some people some real meat on the bone to how they might do that.
Well, I came up through the financial side of the business. I think that's somewhat unusual. I think most people that go into the development side come up through the market side of the business, brokerage side of the business. In my view, real estate development's about satisfying demand. We don't create demand. We are there to meet demand that exists in the market. And knowing supply and demand and knowing the intricacies of each of the market you're engaged in, I think is essential. Dennis is a perfect example of that, coming up through the brokerage side of the business. But the more you know about the dynamics of what's happening in each of the markets you're in, the better. And I think that's probably the most natural way to come up. I think you also have to have a certain mindset as a broker, because you eat what you kill. And I think real estate development is somewhat similar in terms of mindset.
And that's why I asked the question, when you think of an accountant, I know Steve's more than an accountant, obviously, but early in his career, that's what he was. And how do you get that? That's where I was going with that mindset, because it is a bit of a killer instinct. And the green visor look doesn't sound killer to me, but in all seriousness, what skills do you need? What kind of temperament? Maybe some color on that, because everybody maybe wants to be a developer. We don't need any more, but
I think you have to have a really competitive spirit to start with, and it takes a lot of tenacity, a lot of patience, a lot of willingness to work 60, 70-hour weeks. You have to be a real problem solver. Real estate's really about development's about solving problems, managing problems. The things that go well take care of themselves, and the problems are the things that keep you on track. But my mom was a high school PE teacher. We had a kind of a competitive way growing up. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I played sports throughout school, and I just love competition. I love sportsmanship, and I think that whole thing, I sort of look at what I do as a game in a way, and it makes it really interesting, it makes it really fun.
So if I'm someone out in the audience, I want to be you, and I've got some weaknesses. Maybe I'm a market person. What do they need to know from financially? What kinds of what advice specifically would you give someone who has got a weak spot? And maybe somebody's in finance, but should they need to learn the market? How does one go about that other than just hooking on with the developer, which is catch-22 because they don't have the skill. It's a catch-22 thing with getting a job. So what advice do you have for someone?
Well, it's a step at a time, and your growth in the business is incremental, and change and setting goals for yourself. I think you need to set constant goals for yourself, and there's plenty of ways to learn. There's lots of organizations, and NAIOP is a perfect organization. Finding a mentor, I think, is important. Being technologically capable, developing a good financial understanding. Those are a few of the ideas.
So when Steve and I were banging around in college together, we were single, obviously, in college. And I'm going to just share a few stories as we're getting through these questions. Steve, there's different ways to meet ladies, right? And we would go on